tackle any country, but to show how corruption has feasted on the democracy of many countries in Africa, and for these countries to find a solution to this bad practice called corruption. So with that said, here are the top 10 most corrupt countries in Africa. Number 10. Mozambique, CPI 23. In Mozambique, corruption is particularly prominent in public procurement and tax customs administrations. Companies looking to operate in Mozambique face a very high risk of corruption in most sectors. Forms of bribery in Mozambique range from petty bribes to deeply entrenched client and patronage systems, and donor countries have shown dissatisfaction over the country's anti-corruption efforts. Even though there is standing legal framework to curb corruption, there are still many loopholes as it doesn't cover all forms of corruption. For example, embezzlement is not covered. Most heartbreaking is the fact that the judiciary arm is generally corrupt, accepting gifts and bribes and not enforcing the law. The Corruption Perception Index of Mozambique CPI currently stands at 23. Number 9. Zimbabwe CPI 22. According to a survey by Transparency International, 68% of the respondents acknowledged to have bribed their way into getting favors in one way or the other in the last year. Corruption is said to be on the rise in Zimbabwe due to the hardship the citizens go through. Hence, they have to find a way to survive. Findings indicate that this southern African country is among the most corrupt in Africa, as its citizens regard the public sector as the most corrupt sector in the country. The survey by Transparency International also indicates that the citizens cited the police force as the most corrupt, followed by political parties, parliament, legislature, public official, civil service and the judiciary. In the same report, they said that Zimbabwe loses $5 million to corruption every year. Corruption has become endemic within its political, private and civil sectors. Police corruption is a very high risk for businesses to operate in the country. The various forms of corruption affecting the country affect health, education and every other sector in the country, and earning the 9th spot in this year's ranking. Number 8. Chad CPI 19. Corruption is systematic and often takes the form of nepotism and cronyism. It pervades all levels of economy and is perpetuated by weak rule of law and a lack of security. Chad is one of the world's poorest countries, and the majority of Chadians work outside the formal economy. Key anti-corruption legislation includes the anti-corruption law, which criminalizes active and passive bribery and stipulates harsh penalties. However, enforcement is poor and prosecution usually targets political opponents of the government. Corruption is rife at all levels in this Central African country to a disturbing level. It has been on the radar of Transparency International now for over a decade because of how corrupt the country is. Its ranking has definitely improved over the years for the country not to be in the top position as it is usually found. Still, nepotism, bribery, special gifts are still terms very common within the Central African state. Number 7. Republic of Congo CPI 19. Corruption in this country is described by one word, legendary, as it has maintained a strong reputation as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Almost every sector suffers from rampant corruption. With President Sassou Nguesso holding tight to power, it leads to all other government institutions susceptible to political interference and patronage. The worst part is that the government regulation has criminalized all forms of corruption, but breaking this regulation is just a normality, as bribery, extortion and abuse of office in the public sector are still very widely practiced. With a score of 19 on 100, the Republic of Congo is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Number 6. Angola CPI 19. Angola in the past 10 years has lost more than $5 billion to corruption, which makes the country take the 6th position on the list of the most corrupt countries in Africa. A vast majority of the Angolan government engage in collecting funds fraudulently for their personal use. Furthermore, due to 30 years of civil war which left the country in destruction, Angola needed a socio-economic comeback which caused the nation to fall into an infrastructural corruption trap. There has been a high level of infrastructural corruption in Angola since the early 2000s. High oil prices provided the funds and access to credit necessary to rebuild the country's infrastructure after the civil war, and major construction boom ensued. More to this, deep pervasive corruption permeates all sectors of Angola's economy. From individuals to companies, Everyone has to pay facilitation payment and bribes to enable them conduct business, whether as a sole proprietor or company. Number 5. Burundi, CPI 17. Burundi, despite being one of the poorest and hungriest countries in the world, its population has grown rapidly within a 2020 estimated population of 11.89 million. Burundi's population is definitely not the only thing rising rapidly, as its corruption status is not finding it easy to fall. Burundi has not been spared the plague of corruption affecting the continent, as it's positioned itself for many years in the group of the most corrupt countries in the world. From its judiciary to all other sectors, they are not left out at all. Police accept bribes or money to arrest innocent people or free convicted dangerous criminals. The citizens believe before going to any office for any reasons as small as inquiries, you must bring along a bribe in order to be attended to. In 2015, Transparency International declared Burundi as the most corrupt country in East Africa, and its report in 2020 doesn't show any better, as it is not only the 5th most corrupt African country, but is also amongst the top 10 most corrupt countries in the world. Number 4. Libya, CPI 17. After the death of former Libyan president, the country has plunged into serious cases of bribery and corruption. According to the surveys, most of the citizens acknowledge to have bribed their way to getting favors both in the public and private sector. Worst is most of the journalists are actually bribed from reporting the truth about what is happening in the country. One time, a newspaper editor in Libya was given a 15 years jail term in Libya because he published a list of 84 corrupt judges in Libya. The case of Libya is very depressing, given that refusal to comply to the corrupt ways of bribing your way through everything can lead to brutality on the part of the one trying to stand out. To survive, you have to fit in and comply with the unwritten rules set for all. We hope Libya can climb out of this as soon as possible because it holds the country on one spot and hinders progress. Number 3. Sudan, CPI 16. Corruption in Sudan is substantial as it is considered one of the most corrupt nations in the world, and it has one of the most challenging environments for business. It is paramount in every sector as petty and grand corruption, and embezzlement of public funds are entrenched in the fabric of the society, which stands in the way of growth and progress. It takes the form of financial and political corruption, nepotism and misuse of power, and according to the Sudanese citizens, it gets even worse and pervasive when seeking government services. Nepotism and favoritism are a huge aspect in Sudan, as when you have a family member in a position of power, you can basically cruise through a wealthy life without lifting a finger. For instance, among the richest men in Sudan is the brother of President Bashir, who reportedly controls the cement industry, and he is the chief supplier of the Merowe Dam construction firm, not by merit but because of being related to the president. Number 2. South Sudan, CPI 13. South Sudan has been very unstable in terms of politics and economy, which is why the country is probably amongst the most corrupt countries in Africa. A vast majority of the citizens surveyed acknowledge to have bribed their way into getting favors both in the public and private sectors in the country. Corruption in South Sudan is amongst the worst in the world, starting from the citizens right up to the elites. The nation's elites have developed a kleptocratic system that controls every part of South Sudan's economy, politics, and all. Even the anti-corruption branch set up to fight corruption in the country is a strong perpetrator of acts such as bribery, corruption, nepotism, etc. South Sudan has so many corruption scandals, including the so-called Dura saga, in which the government paid $1 million for cereal to fake 81 companies even though the government claims they are fighting corruption. The government sacks any one of its cabinet members who dare to speak up about corruption levels in the country, and the media dares not even think about doing so either. Number 1. Somalia, CPI 10. Somalia takes the top spot on the list of the most corrupt countries in Africa. The country is one of the poorest countries in Africa and unfortunately also one of the most corrupt. In the country, there is a big gap between the rich and the poor. Bribery and corruption is so rampant in the country, which forces almost everyone to level up, thus engaging in the practice of bribery and corruption. Since 2006, Somalia has consistently ranged last on Transparency International's list, indicating it is the most corrupt not only in Africa but also the world. There is no accountability for what is spent or received from trade in the country, which makes it even easier for embezzlement to take place. There you have it, explorers. Those were the top 10 most corrupt countries in Africa in 2020. Thanks for watching this video. If you want us to cover any of your top 10 topics, leave a suggestion in the comments and we will do well to grant your request. Also, if you did enjoy this video, do well to give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe and share with your friends.